UFC 291 is this weekend. I'm going to give you a full card prediction and breakdown of all 12 fights on this card, starting with Matthew Semelsberger versus Uros Medic. And I think I am going to go with Matthew Semelsberger in this one. Uros Medic is very good on the feet. I think this one is probably going to be a scrap, but Uros Medic, I believe, is taking this one on short notice. Hasn't fought in a year, and normally this would actually be pretty good. He's only 30 years old at this point. He is going to be at a 4-inch reach advantage, which isn't that great here, but he is coming in on short notice. I don't like that, especially with the Matthew Semelsberger, I believe, coming off of a very full camp, because I don't know who exactly was replacing him. I think it was Johan Lanes or something that he's replacing. So I am going to go with Matthew Semelsberger. He has a lot of power in his hands. I can see him catching Uros Medic. Jalen Turner was able to catch, not able to catch Jalen Turner. Jalen Turner was able to catch Uros Medic and put him out on the ground. Not necessarily out cold, but put him down on the ground and then get him into a rear naked choke and finish it off that way. He was also able to take down Uros Medic. So I think Matthew Semelsberger has a few ways to win here. It is in Salt Lake City, Utah, so I'm just going to edge with the guy with the full camp here and the guy with the most power. And I think he can end up winning this fight. I think he ends up getting the finish here. I don't mind him getting the finish. Maybe he does get a decision, but in Salt Lake City, Utah, it's going to be a closer fight. So Tapology has 74% Semelsberger, almost about 50% KO there. I am going to go with Semelsberger. I think he gets the finish here just because of the altitude, and I think the power is going to be a little bit too much for Medic. Maybe he does improve here. I'm not sure how much he really can improve. Maybe he gets a little bit finer on the feet, but we'll see how this one goes. I am going to go with Semelsberger, though. Up the card, we have Miranda Maverick versus Priscila Cachoeira. And honestly, this is my toughest fight to predict on this entire card. I'm not sure who I'm going to go with. Miranda Maverick is taking this fight on short notice. It is going to be at flyweight, and I believe Priscila Cachoeira is coming down from bantamweight to flyweight here. So we'll see if she ends up making weight. I don't think she's fought in a year due to some missed weight cuts. I don't even know if it's on her side. We have Sierra Eubanks in 2023. In January, you have Green Silva in April, and then most recently Joanne Wood. So she's had a very bad run of luck of canceled bouts. Not sure if it was her or not, but for this one, Miranda Maverick coming in short notice. But I was like, okay, she's coming in short notice. Salt Lake City, Utah. Priscila Cachoeira, same height as Jasmine Jasudavicius, decent on the ground and in the grappling, really scrappy on the feet. I think she's probably a little bit better than Jasudavicius on the feet. She's a little bit more scrappy, has a little bit more power in her hands where she can finish the fight here. But Miranda Maverick does train out of Elevation Fight Team, and I don't agree with the minus 340 odds, especially with lower level women's MMA. I do like Priscila Cachoeira as an underdog, but I'm just not sure in picking her, honestly. Miranda Maverick, she did lose to Jasmine Jasudavicius, got taken down and was trying to do stuff off her back. Didn't look too good in that fight. And I just don't know how much I like her here. Maybe she'll be a little bit better in the altitude, but I'm still, like, as I'm talking right now, I'm still unsure with who I'm going to take. So I'm going to go with Priscila Cachoeira. Maybe this one's going to be a very bad pick in the long run, but I think she's going to be able to do decent on the ground. She has been submitted twice. I think she's been submitted against Jillian Robertson and Valentina Shevchenko, and that was about it in the UFC. So I guess those aren't bad girls to be submitted by, but I don't know if there's, I don't know how much of a threat Miranda Maverick is going to bring her to Priscila Cachoeira on the ground by like submission. She is fighting out of elevation, so she is going to have the better cardio. I'm assuming it is on short notice. That's the thing. I just don't know what her conditioning is going to be like on short notice because she is out of elevation. So I'm going to say Priscila Cachoeira just hurts her on the feet early on and wins a decision. I don't know. I don't like this fight. I'm going to go with Priscila Cachoeira. I think she's just going to do a little bit more damage on the feet. I don't know if I see fight-ending ability from Maverick on the ground. She does have some decent like submission skills, but I just don't see her getting it done here. So I am going to go with Priscila Cachoeira. Maybe she does end up getting the finish on the feet. She is going to have a full training camp, I believe, for this fight. So we'll see how this one goes. I am going to go for Priscila Cachoeira. She is a pretty big underdog, so we'll see how this one goes. Up the card, we have Jake Matthews versus Darrius Flowers. I think I am going to go with Jake Matthews here. I think he's just going to be better on the feet. Darrius Flowers is making his UFC debut after beating Emirhan Gogoladze, which is actually a pretty decent prospect coming into the Contender Series. I thought Gogoladze was, I guess you could say, on his way to winning. He was a lot better on the feet, had a lot more power, it looked like. Darrius Flowers does have a lot of power in his hands, but was winning on the feet, got Flowers into an inverted triangle, and then basically Darrius Flowers picked him up and like tombstoned him. He landed on a shoulder and it like dislocated. So that's how the fight ended. It was a very sad thing that happened there. Hopefully they can get Gogo Ladze back on the Contender Series. I don't know what he's been doing since, but I think Jake Matthews is going to be better on the feet. I don't know if I trust him after losing to Matthew Semelsberger. Like, I thought he was going to be so much better after beating Andre Fialho because he looked crazy there, but it seems like Fialho is getting beat by a lot of people. And Matthew Semelsberger is kind of just a dog in a lot of his fights. Like, a lot of people were hyping up Jake Matthews going into that fight, and Semelsberger kind of just, the power was a little bit too much for Matthews. So maybe the power is going to be too much for him against Flowers here, but I think Jake Matthews gets this one done. I think he's going to be a little bit too slick on the feet. We'll see how this one goes. I think the majority of Tapology is picking Jake Matthews. The UFC kind of giving him a softball here. Let's see how he does. Maybe he ends up getting the finish, but I think Flowers has some decent power in his hands. So this one could be very interesting. They're both 28. They're both relatively young. Matthews will have a 1-inch reach advantage, so it's not much there. 89% from Tapology. What is that? 26% within that by KO. I think I see a decision. It's just, with a lot of these fights, you have to take into factor the Salt Lake City, Utah cardio problem that could possibly be happening on here. So you never really know, but I think Jake Matthews does end up winning this one, possibly by finish. Maybe Darrius Flowers just tires out as the fight goes on a little bit, and maybe that's how he wins it, but I can easily see this one going to a decision. Up the card, we have CJ Vergara versus Vinicius Salvador. CJ Vergara does seem like he does beat like a certain level of competition in that flyweight division. I am going to take him in this matchup. He beat Clayton Rodriguez by split decision, lost to Ode Osborne, beat Bruno Correa on the Contender Series, beat Daniel Lacerda, and then he lost to Tatsuro Taira, who's a very good prospect out of flyweight, and then Ode Osborne, who's not that bad at like an unranked flyweight. So he's losing to a certain level of fighters, and he's beating a certain level of fighter, and I think the guys that he beats are on that level of Vinicius Salvador. So he beat Daniel Lacerda. I think, did Vinicius Salvador fight? No, he hasn't. Okay. He fought Victor Altamirano, who I don't even think is that great either, and lost to him by decision. Beat Shannon Ross by KO. Pretty much did pretty well in the Contender Series against him, and Shannon Ross isn't that good. So, I don't know. Maybe Salvador can beat the guys on his level, but I think CJ Vergara is a little bit higher than him, probably in that mid to upper tier of unranked flyweights, and I think he just gets this one done. Maybe he ends up getting the finish later on in this fight. You just don't really know, because you don't know how the altitude will definitely factor into this matchup, but I think he can win this one by decision, maybe 2-1 on the scorecards, 29-28, but we'll see how this one goes. 77% of Tapology has Vergara. I think I'm going to take him here as well, so let's move on. Up the card, we have Roman Kopylov versus Claudio Ribeiro. I am going to go with Roman Kopylov. He is coming off a couple of decent wins. Alessio Di Chirico won that one by KO, and then beat Punahele Soriano by KO also, which is a pretty solid win because Soriano is a very tough dude, and getting a KO over him is definitely a very good thing. Claudio Ribeiro made his UFC debut on the Contender Series against Ivan Valenzuela. Lost to Abdul Razak Al Hassan, which he is incredible, like an insane amount of power, and then beat Joseph Holmes by KO, which is the guy he's supposed to beat. But I think Roman Kopylov, he does have some really good power in his hands and has a really stiff jab. I believe he's going to be at a 2-inch reach advantage, so we'll see how he deals with that. But Roman Kopylov, definitely a guy that kind of stays on the outside a little bit more and has guys like Claudio Ribeiro come towards him. And Claudio Ribeiro was kind of going after Joseph Holmes in their last fight. So if Roman Kopylov can work off his jab in this one, it's a very, very stiff jab. I think he can end up possibly getting a finish here because Abdul Razak, I know he does have a lot of KO power. Maybe Kopylov can get a KO as this fight goes on, as Ribeiro starts to tire out a little bit more here, but we'll see what happens in this matchup. I think Kopylov does end up getting the finish here. Kopylov 89% picked by Tapology, 73% within that picked by KO. Minus 230 favorite. I think that's probably about correct here. Again, just works off his jab. Lands some really good shots on Ribeiro, and I think he ends up finishing him maybe in like the second or third round is how I see it, as Ribeiro starts to tire out a little bit more. So Kopylov by finish. Up the card, we have Trevin Giles versus Gabriel Bonfim, and I have to go with Gabriel Bonfim. I'm a really big fan of this dude. He's a really, really good fighter, really good prospect coming up. Only 25, well, he's about 26 years old, I guess, if you want to round up. But his brother, Ismail Bonfim, a very good lightweight as well. I don't know if I want to get into the separation of the two, but I made a video a while ago just talking about them as prospects. And I even said then that Gabriel Bonfim, I think, is going to be a better prospect than Ismail Bonfim. And that's why I picked Terrence McKinney to beat Ismail Bonfim, and then he ended up kneeing Terrence McKinney. So I was like, okay, Ismail Bonfim must be pretty good as well. But then lost his last matchup. So I think Gabriel Bonfim is the better of the two. He's still a little bit green on the feet. He did scrap quite a bit against Munir Lazez, kind of kept his chin up a little bit more and was a little bit sloppier. Maybe he was just trying to get the finish there, but ended up getting a finish off a guillotine and then flipped him over and got him. So mounted guillotine finish. So he just flipped him over. Really clean finish there. On the Contender Series, beat Trey Waters by a Von Flue choke. Trevin Giles' last fight was a win over Preston Parsons by split decision. Beat Louis Cosi by decision there. Lost to Michael Morales by KO. Lost to Dricus Duplessis by KO. So I think Gabriel Bonfim is definitely that level of fighter where he can get a finish over Trevin Giles. He's very good on the feet, very good on the ground, very talented in general, very athletic. I think he gets this one done. Minus 300 is very interesting. Maybe he's definitely, you can probably stuff him in a parlay to get a little bit more value out of the parlay if you got a deeper one. So he will be at a 2-inch reach disadvantage, but I just don't see Trevin Giles having anything for Gabriel Bonfim in this one. Bonfim 93% favored in this matchup, 68% by submission, 16% by KO. Within that, I am going to go Gabriel Bonfim by finish, probably in the first round. I want to say maybe late first round, early second round finish for Gabriel Bonfim. Up the card, we have Derrick Lewis versus Marcos Rogério de Lima. This one was like, if I had to juggle between this matchup and Miranda Maverick versus Priscila Cachoeira, with which one was tougher to predict, because Derrick Lewis, you kind of have a hard time predicting him at this point in his career. I guess I got his last couple matchups correct, but you just don't know, like, mentally at what point is he going to check out in a fight. Marcos Rogério de Lima won against Waldo Cortez Acosta, won against Andrei Arlovsky. Like, he's fighting a little bit lower competition than a Derrick Lewis, so you really just don't know on that level also. But looking at both of their fights, Marcos Rogério de Lima against Waldo Cortez Acosta, a lot of leg kicks, and Derrick Lewis against Tai Tuivasa was really scared of the leg kicks. So I was like, all right, this is going to be a little bit worrying. But looking further into the fight with Rogério de Lima versus Cortez Acosta was landing some really good shots off the counter. And I think Derrick Lewis is not going to be too worried about the leg kicks and is really just he's going to get hit with a couple leg kicks. He's going to be like, all right, well, I guess I don't have much time in here. He just really doesn't care at this point. I think he just throws some really good shots and ends up KOing Marcos Rogério de Lima. That's pretty much what I got. Maybe Rogério de Lima can shoot him for a takedown after a couple leg kicks, assuming that Derrick Lewis is going to rush him a little bit more. But Derrick Lewis has just some killer power. Maybe as this fight goes on, if it does end up going past the first round, if Rogério de Lima ends up taking down Derrick Lewis, which I don't see happening. Derrick Lewis has a really good takedown defense. I know he got mauled by Sergey Spivak, but Sergey Spivak definitely proved himself to be a really good wrestler. Even Derrick Lewis was getting up from the takedowns, but after a certain point when you're just getting thrown around, Derrick Lewis kind of just checked out of that fight and says, like, I'm done. No more for me, especially at this point in his career. I just see him catching paychecks, and maybe after like the first round, I think he's kind of done. So I'm going to take Derrick Lewis. I think he has the power to KO Rogério de Lima very early in this matchup, just with a couple counters. I just don't see Rogério de Lima getting the takedown on him, and I don't see Derrick Lewis kind of just sitting with some of those leg kicks that Rogério de Lima will definitely go on him. So I am going to go with Derrick Lewis. Derrick Lewis will have a 4-inch reach advantage in this matchup. Cortez Acosta, I believe, had like a 3-inch reach advantage over Cortez Acosta and was landing some really good shots. Even though Rogério de Lima does keep a higher guard, he was just landing shots right through it. So I'm going to go Derrick Lewis by KO in the first round. This one could be a pretty even matchup on betting lines and Tapology, which I completely understand. So Lewis is a 61% picked by Tapology in this one, 91% by KO, 39% for Rogério de Lima. I don't mind it. Pretty much evens on the betting. I feel like this is kind of like a 50-50, but I'll probably edge a little bit more 55-45, just with the maybe 60-40, just with the factor that I think Derrick Lewis has an easier job catching Rogério de Lima than a Rogério de Lima has an easier job of catching Derrick Lewis. And honestly, Derrick Lewis also kind of just reached at the leg kicks of Tai Tuivasa, which could be a really big problem in this matchup, but I think I trust him a little bit here. I think he does end up getting the KO. Up the card, we have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Michel Pereira. I'm going to go with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in this one. I was in any other place that isn't Salt Lake City, Utah at altitude, I would take Michel Pereira. I think he has definitely that style to where he can get a finish over Wonderboy, especially at 40 years old. Like, even the the Pettis fight where he got a KO over Wonder Boy. It was just a very unorthodox style where he hit him with a Superman punch and KO'd him. Michel, I was going to call him Michael Pereira. Michel Pereira has a very weird style, also very explosive, which is why I think it's going to be a very big problem in this matchup for him against a guy like Wonder Boy Thompson in altitude. I think Pereira's just going to gas at a certain point. Like, he normally gasses in his fights relatively easily. I think in his last fight, he didn't gas too hard because I think he paced himself a little bit more. But I think after maybe the first round, he may gas a little bit if he does end up getting the finish. So I'm going to go Wonder Boy. Maybe Michel Pereira tries to do a couple takedowns, but I think he just tires out in this fight too much, and I think Wonder Boy may possibly get a finish here, maybe goes to a decision. I think he just is a little bit more technical, kind of will stay on the outside, and I think this is more based on Pereira gassing in this one. So Pereira's still relatively young, 30 years old, heading into his prime. 2-inch reach advantage for Thompson. I am going to take him in this one. 82% picked by Tapology, 83% within that by decision. Minus 195 favorite for Wonder Boy in this matchup. So I am going to go with him in this one by maybe it's a late round finish. I can see him getting a decision though. Up the card, we have Michael Chiesa versus Kevin Holland. I am going to go with Kevin Holland. I don't know if I trust Michael Chiesa at 35 years of age. His last fight was almost was like a year and a half ago. I was going to say 2 years, but a year and a half ago. Kevin Holland 2 months ago. So still pretty active, especially for welterweight. He made that cut from middleweight a while ago, but pretty active for Kevin Holland. Really good reach advantage in this matchup, about 5.5 inches. And he's got good power in his hands. Very weird striker. I believe he does have a Darce choke on his record, a couple of Darce chokes on his record, and I feel like Chiesa is the type of guy to get submitted in this one, even though he is the grappler. And at altitude, I think it might be a little bit rough for him in this one. I can see Kevin Holland just catching him coming in. Maybe he ends up putting him in a Darce choke, kind of like how Luque did on the ground. I guess it would be a little bit different, but maybe on the feet, he gets him in a guillotine and then just transitions to a Darce or something like that. I can definitely see something like that happening, or I can just see Kevin Holland possibly finishing Chiesa, or I can see this going to decision. So I can see this going either way. Not either way pick-wise. I can see this going either way by however Kevin Holland ends up winning this matchup, if that kind of makes sense. So a decision I can definitely see happening, like 2-1, a finish by submission, which I think is weird because Chiesa, I feel like he's the type of guy to get submitted by a guy like Kevin Holland got submitted by Luque, even though he does have a really good Darce. But I can also see Holland winning this one by TKO. So I don't know. I think he does end up getting the finish here, probably in the second round, late second round for Holland. But I'm going to go with Holland by finish. 78% picked by Tapology, 63% within that by KO. I agree with them in this matchup. Let's move on. Up the card, we have Tony Ferguson versus Bobby Green. And now I think a lot of people are underrating Tony Ferguson in this matchup. I know he's almost 40 years old. Bobby Green is 36 years old, almost 37. So they're both getting a little bit older in age. They're probably retiring. Both of them are probably retiring some point within the next couple of years. But I think people are really underrating Tony Ferguson. Like, his last fight was a switch up to a 3-rounder to a 5-rounder, up a weight class at 170, and he did not look good for 170, which I thought that was a very, very bad move. Like, he looked horrible. I'm kind of happy in retrospect that he didn't end up fighting the Leach and getting KO'd. But it got moved from a 3-round fight to a 5-round fight, and he did not look good at 170. So it was just a very bad mess for Ferguson in that one. And he ended up getting submitted by Nate Diaz, which isn't really a good look at this point. But before then, Michael Chandler looked really, really good in the first round, but then ended up getting a front kicked out cold in the second round. Bobby Green, I don't think he looked that good in that fight against Jared Gordon. Like, he looked like Bobby Green at certain points, but he was like throwing some really weird shots. Like he was just hooking shots, but they were just not, it didn't even look like Bobby Green. I don't know what he was doing. Maybe he was getting frustrated and that's why he went for the headbutt accidentally. I don't know. You can make that argument if you want, but I don't know. It looked like a very weird Bobby Green. He was very technical, but he just wasn't landing the shots on Jared Gordon. I don't think Jared Gordon's that good of a striker. So Tony Ferguson being a plus 260 underdog, I really like. I'm not going to pick him here. I think this is a split decision win for Bobby Green. I see people saying 30-27 for Bobby Green. I honestly don't see it. Tony Ferguson will have a 5.5 inch reach advantage in this matchup. And I think he's just going to make this a scrap with Bobby Green. I can honestly see him winning this matchup 100%. I think people are underrating him in this one. 76% picked by Tapology. I'm willing to pick Tony Ferguson, but I don't know. I think especially at this point in both of their careers, I just kind of have to edge it with Bobby Green a little bit more here. I guess we'll kind of see how he looks in this matchup, especially with the cardio. I think we'll definitely see, I think just looking at them, Tony Ferguson and Bobby Green, who do you think is going to be pushing a little bit more in these rounds at altitude within the 3-round fight? Obviously, Tony Ferguson, I think, will probably be a little bit more active on the feet, like doing just more pressuring. Bobby Green will be a little bit more technical, like being stationary, landing some good shots, and kind of just moving out of the way. So maybe Tony Ferguson will be working a little bit more, and I just don't know if he'll tire out. He works pretty hard. He is getting older, so you never know, but he is making that cut to 155. So I'm not expecting to look like 170 to Tony Ferguson. But man, I'm really, like, personally, how I think I'm gonna put a little bit of money on Tony Ferguson, maybe by decision. Not even decision, probably the money line, like plus 260 is pretty good. But I think people are really underrating him here. I do think Bobby Green does win by a split decision, but I think it's a really close fight, and I think it's going to be a really good scrap. This will probably be like the last good performance of Tony Ferguson. Maybe they give him a good fight next, but I am going to go Bobby Green by split decision. I think it's a very close fight. Of the card, we have Jan Błachowicz versus Alex Pereira. And I think a lot of people are going to be going with Jan Błachowicz. I have not looked at the top. Okay, so it's 50-50. Very interesting. I think a lot of people are going to be going with Jan Błachowicz. I am going to go with Alex Pereira. These guys are even. I think the thing is Rakic versus Jan Błachowicz. Jan Błachowicz was checking quite a bit of Alexander Rakic's leg kicks. But I think Alex Pereira, just the way his stance is, he's really good at hiding it. And we don't know the kind of power that he has at light heavyweight. But I think the KO loss that he had against Israel Adesanya's last fight was a lot. And I won't say a lot because Israel Adesanya is good, obviously. But I think quite a bit of his chinniness at middleweight that you saw against Israel Adesanya in both of their fights was the fact that he was cutting a lot of weight. So I think he's 230 in the off season, and he has to cut like 40 or 50. 45 pounds to 185 to make the weight. So he's cutting a lot of weight. His chin's not going to be the same as strong as it normally is. And I think he's going to have a little bit more power here because he is going to be building a little bit more in this weight division. It is a little bit of a sooner turnaround. It's going to be a 3-month turnaround since he was KO'd out cold, which I don't really like. But I think if you're edging this fight to a certain fighter, I don't trust Jan Błachowicz, especially at altitude at 40 years old. You'll expect him to be getting a little bit more of like the injuries, especially when you're older. Your body's just not going to hold up as much when you get older. And I think he's going to be the first one to tire out here. I think Alex Pereira is just going to be chopping at the leg. Maybe Jan Błachowicz gets a takedown. Alex Pereira kind of moves towards the fence a little bit more and tries to work his way up. I think Jan Błachowicz is going to be gassing midway through this fight, and I can see Alex Pereira just KOing him. I think he lands a really good left hook. Jan Błachowicz is a bigger guy. I just don't see, maybe he can land a punch on Alex Pereira. I wouldn't be surprised if he does land a punch because it is fighting, but I just don't see him landing that big blow that will put Alex Pereira down. I don't see him controlling him as much as other people might think in the wrestling. I think Alex Pereira does a lot better in here. I think he does end up finishing Jan Błachowicz by KO. So I'm going to go first round KO for Alex Pereira. Choose up that leg early on. Jan Błachowicz will look for takedowns right after that. Alex Pereira will move his way towards the fence. He's going to work his way up a little bit more. Jan Błachowicz is going to back up, try and land like a couple hooks against Alex Pereira against the fence. Won't land him, and I think he'll be a little bit tired, and Jan Błachowicz is going to slow down a little bit more, and I can just see Alex Pereira landing a really good left hook on him and putting him down and finishing him up on the ground. So I'm going to go with Alex Pereira, first round KO again. Tapology 50-50 in this one. A lot of people are saying Błachowicz by decision. It's just a 40-year-old Błachowicz at light heavyweight. I just don't see him winning by decision. At altitude, I don't like that fight for him. I have to go with Alex Pereira. I guess I don't have to, but I am going to go with Alex Pereira by finish. Up the card, we have Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje II. Obviously, this is a rematch of their first matchup where Dustin Poirier ended up finishing Justin Gaethje by KO in the fourth round. Dustin Poirier's last fight was a win over Michael Chandler due to rear naked choke, lost to Charles Oliveira by rear naked choke, and then obviously beat Conor McGregor both of those times. Justin Gaethje, I believe, won against Rafael Fiziev, which I thought Fiziev won that fight off of damage. It was a pretty close fight, so I don't mind it going either way. But Justin Gaethje also lost to Charles Oliveira right before then, and then beat Michael Chandler by decision. Now for this one, I am going to go with Justin Gaethje. I think he's going to be a little bit more patient in this matchup. I was expecting in the Fiziev fight for him to be a little bit more sloppy and for him to just wing punches like you saw how he did against Charles Oliveira, where Charles Oliveira kind of just walked him down, and obviously Justin Gaethje landed some really good punches, but it was more of a scrap. Like, he was just winging punches like a crazy dude. I was expecting that a Fiziev fight, and Fiziev did hurt him early on, but he's much more patient in that matchup, and I think if he does that against Dustin Poirier, I think he can definitely win. This is going to be at altitude as well, so that does favor Justin Gaethje. He does train at Elevation Fight Team in Colorado, and obviously they call it Mile High for a reason. He's going to have exponentially a better time in this matchup, if that makes any sense. But Dustin Poirier is obviously a very good fighter, won in their first bout by a finish, but I don't know. I just don't see it here. I think maybe Dustin Poirier can hurt him early on and maybe just tries to go out. And the thing with Dustin Poirier is when he hurts you, he definitely finishes you. Like, it's just crazy. Like, he just doesn't let these guys get off if he does hurt them. So I can't really say if Dustin Poirier hurts him and he just goes all out and ends up gassing himself out, that's how he loses. But I can definitely see that happening at like the end of a round. Maybe Justin Gaethje gets caught and he's just going to try to finish him, but he just escapes around, and Dustin Poirier is super tired. But I think as this fight goes on, it will favor Justin Gaethje, and maybe we could see a finish by Justin Gaethje. It's been a while since Poirier has been finished. I think you have to get like a really weird, not a really weird punch, but I think you have to catch him when he's not really expecting it. I guess that's how it works for a lot of people. But his last fight that he lost by KO was against Michael Johnson in 2016, and that was a very, very long time ago. I don't know if I see Justin Gaethje finishing him by KO, but I think he's going to tear up that leg of Dustin Poirier. I think Dustin Poirier is going to end up gassing a little bit more in this matchup than Justin Gaethje would. I think Dustin Poirier, 7 days before this fight is going down to Salt Lake City. So I just don't like that, especially with the altitude involved here. I think Justin Gaethje probably wins this one by decision. Maybe 48-47. I can see this one being, I can see Dustin Poirier winning the early rounds and Justin Gaethje basically winning the last three. Obviously, it'll never be exactly like that, but you can mix them in a little bit more. I think Dustin Poirier will try to finish Justin Gaethje at some point. Maybe hurts him at the end of the round and just tries to go all out a little bit more. I think Justin Gaethje is just going to tear up the leg of Dustin Poirier, and I can just see Gaethje landing the better punches as the fight goes on. Justin Gaethje also did pretty good in that first fight. I believe there was like a couple fouls, and there was like a couple weird, I wouldn't say weird, but I don't know if it was a groin strike or if it was an eye poke that took a point away in their first matchup. And it would have been a little bit more even if Justin Gaethje obviously wasn't as sloppy, but it could have been a little bit more even fight going into that fourth round. So I'm going to go with Justin Gaethje. I think he tears up the leg of Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier ends up tiring out as the fight goes on, and I can see Gaethje winning this one by decision. I don't know if he wins this one by finish. Obviously, Poirier can win this one by finish, but I just don't see him finishing Gaethje in this matchup. So especially with how patient Gaethje has been fighting, he's not as much of a loose cannon in there or how I'm expecting him at least. He wasn't a loose cannon in his last fight with his striking style. So I am going to go with Justin Gaethje. Finishing this one, Tapology, 64% for Dustin Poirier, 36% for Justin Gaethje, which I think is very interesting. I think this one might flip a little bit as the week goes on, so keep an eye on that. But I think the betting odds, underdog for Justin Gaethje is really good. I'm probably putting money on him. I think he definitely wins this one. I think he's actually a little bit more hungry for the win also. If you were to look at both Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje, I think Justin Gaethje said, like, oh, this is like really my last ride, my last run at the title. I think Dustin Poirier taking more time between fights. Like, we hadn't seen him for a year after that Charles Oliveira fight. Fought Michael Chandler. It's been, 8 months since he's fought? I don't think he's not the most active guy anymore. I don't know how much he really wants it compared to Justin Gaethje. So that's another reason I'm going to go with Gaethje by decision. I think it's going to be like a 48-47. I don't know if he gets a 49-46. Maybe he ends up getting the finish here, but I am going to go with Justin Gaethje for the win. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think about this main event, and I'll see you guys next time.